tenure, the company created the RPA market, acquired 6,000 plus enterprise customers. It established its presence, the presence in 50 plus countries. We used to hold massive events, Automation Anywhere, and Abhijit was on stage. He's like the crowd attractor. Right? And we grew revenues to hundreds of millions of dollars. So Abhijit has helped numerous companies navigate through successful transformations, including LiveRamp, Autodesk, Oracle, and Agile. And of course, my own startup, he was an advisor, which I just exit successfully so that I can focus on my venture firm. So thank you for that, Abhijit. And Abhijit's entrepreneurial endeavors include a successful exit of his own startup, Atma Software, which is now, is it Atma? Which is part of Oracle, and he enjoys mentoring StarTech's portfolio companies. And actually, he does enjoy mentoring in general. You don't have to be a StarTech's portfolio company.
All right. Thanks, Mala. Mala led overall product strategy and delivered the first RPA SaaS offering for me. So thank you for all your work there. Very interesting times because at that point in time, we delivered one of the first AI-based products. AI was kind of a big buzzword, but enterprises couldn't really figure out how to use AI. And now I feel that with GenAI, it's become so mainstream, and I like the increased use, the focus on use cases that goes on now.
Right.
I wish that was there much earlier, where everywhere you look around, I talk to a lot of our users and customers and all, and they were literally struggling on how to use AI. They're like, it sounds cool, it's a buzzword and all. How do I actually use it?
Yeah.
So big progress between then and now.
Yeah, and we had those agents. RPA tasks were agents already.
Yeah.
And so it's like the same old new when it comes from our perspective, right?
Yeah.
And that's the interesting thing. So my background is in middleware technologies. I used to be in business process management. I was the Beeple architect at BEA, building the Beeple engine, and then I went on to TIPCO to transition into product marketing for a few years. So I am a marketer as well. And then I was head of product marketing for the Fusion middleware stack at Oracle before I joined Abhijit and Automation Anywhere. And then I've done gigs where I was head of privacy for WhatsApp at Meta. So yeah, so lots of great experience. So that's the value for you. So what are the biggest misconceptions you see product leaders having about AI right now? And how do we overcome them?
Great start. One of the biggest misconceptions that I see personally is that AI is this magic bullet, right? Once I put an AI-based feature in my product, it's going to increase my revenue tenfold. It's going to magically improve my overall user experience. It's going to, I guess, move my product to the cool kids table, all of that, right? My biggest worry with that is that people who think that way, they're kind of missing the journey to get to that. So my advice, or the key advice here, would be that AI is not this magic bullet. It's a great technology. It actually offers you a lot that it can do, but you have to be careful with several things. You have to actually follow a disciplined approach. One, you have to first and foremost is understand your buyer and user personas and get their pain points. And in terms of how can AI really help, your key users, right? So, let me give you one example from Redwood, right? So at Redwood, our user personas, we had two key personas. One was these people who create the automations. Now, these were actually developers and builders and so on, right? And then there were other people who actually operated that overall automation platform. So, and this is, why I'm bringing this up is it's key to understand because there's a lot of work involved in actually arriving at this. So the people who build automations, when we did the research and all, first thing to look at is the ratio. Like, what is your impact when you had, just in terms of the number of users, right? We found out for every 5 builders, there are probably 20 operators. Why? Because the way the system scales is you need more operators to keep on top of the overall platform, right? What it is, what automations are being scheduled and so on. So so from that, we actually said, well, let's help the operators and let's kind of prioritize that. Then we looked at what were their pain points. It's about, operating the platform at scale. So then we realized, okay, these are the key insights that AI needs to actually perform. So my key point is you have to go through that exercise to be able to figure this out. When we started, we were like, hey, can we look at GenAI features? GenAI needs to be this big buzzword. And when the PMs came to me with that, I was like, well, that's a great start, but what are people going to do with the product and what are the key pain points, right? So that's key to understand. The second big misconception, and it's especially true now than a few years earlier, is that it takes data scientists to build AI products. So as all product leaders in this room, one of the key things that product leaders need to understand more is the possibilities and the limitations of AI, right? Because AI is dependent, like data is a critical fuel for it. You have to understand what AI can and cannot do, right? You don't need to necessarily understand the details of the technical algorithms and all. So that's key, is that the what is more important. First figure that out, the what and the why, and then focus on the how. Now, again, that being said, you'll always need to work with engineers, data scientists, and so on to be able to iterate, kind of start small, learn, and actually iterate, right? I think, Mala, you probably remember the example that Automation Anywhere, we had a document processing product, and that was our first AI-based product, right? And why we went into that was not because, it was, there was a lot of AI buzz around us and all, but we actually learned from our customers that, hey, the data that we are using to actually automate our business processes, well, a lot of that data is actually unstructured, and it's coming to us in the form of scanned PDFs and documents and all. So without this data, I'm kind of stuck. So the way I looked at it is that unstructured data was an obstacle in the path to my product adoption, right? Without that, I could not expand into my customers. And so that was the reason. Now, we started small and we addressed a specific kind of document. And as we went on, that's how we started generalizing our AI model. At one point in time, after we gained 100 customers, we found out that the AI model was completely insufficient to address further needs because the types of documents completely changed and all. And we then began competing against some of the cloud providers and all. So that leads to a partner versus compete strategy, all of those kind of things, right? So it's important to kind of start out small and then keep iterating. What saved us was we were able to stay one step ahead because of constant touch, with our customers. And I remember one of the key things to adoption about AI, at least in the first 50 customers, was not the accuracy and the precision itself. It was the ease of user experience in the validation of the AI output and training of the model. So you got to keep those kind of things. That's why I said, evaluate, really do the deep research on your users' pain points.
Yeah, and I think, the thing that I loved about Viva when I worked there is the verticalization that happens when you start doing customer analysis.
Yeah.
You go to such a depth that you're suddenly building FDA-compliant products that people cannot penetrate easily,
yeah.
Right? And it's just that differentiation that I'm not quite seeing. A lot of startups I'm looking at now that I'm running a venture firm, right? We're evaluating, Raymond and I evaluating startups all the time. Feels like a very thin veneer on top of LLMs. And I'm like, what? And you're 25 years old. I'm like, you're going to sell to enterprise? Yes. So what do you think we could do to, change that? Looking out in 5 years, what do you envision that AI would fundamentally change in terms of product leadership, founders' DNA? What do you think will happen?
5 years out, I think, is a lot in terms of AI, right? But I see kind of the key trends that I see, right, is the first one is that product leaders will focus more on the strategic aspects of this. Right now, a lot of you have worked for companies where you're doing a lot of A/B testing, cohort analysis, all of these kind of things, right? Which is your basic bread and butter to get to the data, right? AI will be able to automate a lot of these PM tasks. I know in the past, I've implemented tools Like the team has implemented tools for like Heap.io, right? Amplitude and so on. They give a lot of basic data output.
Yeah.
AI can actually sit on top of that, give you a lot of insights, and it can actually, as product leaders, you'll be able to spend more time on what are the key strategy questions.
Right.
I think, frankly, this is something that every product leader wishes that they had more time. It says, what are the adjacent white space that I need to enter in the next 1 or 2 years, right? For my next board presentation, what is it that I need to like tell the board that, this is kind of the focus because I really need investments in this area and I need to get some budget approved, right? So it's those kind of things that PM leaders today are, and I see this everywhere, that they're not spending the time because these things take a lot of time, right? So that's the first thing, which is like that whole like strategic focus, right? The second, I would say, is a much deeper understanding of your users, right? It's just like, you will get better insights on your users simply by them using, let's say, your AI-based features in the product, or just, like in Heap.io, for example, you can create all these different funnels, right? You can say, hey, so many people logged on to the system, so many people tried to create my whatever object that they need to create, and these many people failed, and why is it that they failed and all, right? So you'll be able to get like meta-analysis on top of that, and from that even discover, what are the customer segments where I grew the most, just last quarter. Like those metrics will be at your tips. Right now, I'm actually, a lot of these metrics for me, they come out of Salesforce, because I have my teams, giving me Salesforce-based reports where they're saying, yeah, we closed these many deals. And by the way, in the close lost, this was our biggest problem, right? So I think those kind of things, you'll be able to like get insights on those and change your strategy and pivot, which is very key, right? And last but not least, I think there'll be new responsibilities that the product leaders will have to undertake. These are responsibilities that you haven't thought of before, right? One is, what about AI bias? Is your AI model fair? Is it equitable? What is it doing wrong? Is the accuracy and precision, acceptable? Are you creating a disservice here, or are you adding value, right? So those kind of things. The other big thing is your product being used ethically? Now, because your product is now not just collecting data, but it's also now giving AI-based insights, what is it actually being used for? You'll be surprised. There'll be, several uses that may be kind of bordering on, like the not so good use of your product, right? So I feel like at least these three things, I don't know about you, Mala.
Yeah, I don't think the product management function is going to disappear, but I was having an interesting conversation with a few people here about how the mid-level of management is disappearing entirely. It's either very strategic work or you're doing very basic grind work with engineers, right? Because there's just not a need for any more of layers of management simply because there isn't as much structure and process needed in organizations. And maybe AI is part of that wave that's creating that.
I think with GenAI specifically on the marketing side, and I saw this like TED Talk a while back, it's very interesting. I mean, I think a number of you know that by 2026, all of the content on the web will be regurgitated back by AI. And so no new effective content will be created. And what will that do to all the existing LLMs and all, right? So the advice was like, come up with original marketing content. And, I can kind of see where that is, why that is being said, because I find a lot of marketing teams, use ChatGPT and Gemini and all heavily to get the first draft out and all. Yeah. My advice to them always has been like, go in with original thought in there. Don't just ask for a blind, like tailor your prompts accordingly and really validate what comes out, right? And add your original content, because there is that danger as well.
We evaluated a company called Raycaster. What it basically does, it's a Y Combinator company. It generates the questions for you. So it's a prompt generator. But they're tailoring it on life sciences. And I think that's what we need to do as well. Kind of like become the prompt generators. And hopefully Raycaster still won't take it all over. Right? But yeah, I think the industry domain expertise plays a role. But then if you pick the wrong industry, then you're kind of stuck.
Yeah.
That's the other thing, right? Finance is probably the best place to land financial technologies. So how do you balance the wow factor of AI with genuine user needs and product market fit? So I think AI is like, so in 1999 at Stanford University, I was teaching AI as a graduate student to make a living. That's how I could pay my tuition. And I got that role because nobody wanted to work in AI. Right? And now things have changed. The wow factor of AI is kind of like funny to me when I look at it because it's not a wow as much. And I think it's like spreadsheets. It's just a new tool that you had in your inbox or in your toolkit. And so if you're going to build your strategy around AI, then you're in some deep shit, right? And that's the point of it. So would you be valuable without AI? And that's how we built our product, thankfully, because the reason I was able to exit is because we took AT&T live. And we were able to do that because we could take it live without GenAI.
Yeah, I could see, there was real value to the users.
There's real value to the user without GenAI because there is no way they're going to turn on OpenAI and say, okay, send all my data. I'm AT&T, send all my customer data to the cloud. Cloud itself was hard because we had to deploy it on-prem, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the thing. I think the question to ask every time I build something or I'm evaluating something is, what would this look like if I took out OpenAI? And then what's the gross margin on this product? And how much of that gross margin actually is a bill paying OpenAI? And some of what we get is OpenAI credits. Really easy to land these days, right? You get $10,000, you're building a product in 3 months, and then what happens when you run out of credits? So the first 10 customers, your gross margin is quite significant because your OpenAI bill is 0. And then at the end of 3 months, there it goes. Your wow factor is kicked in.
Yeah.
So I think that's my perspective. Like measure your gross margin and remove the wow factor and look at it like spreadsheets. And then if you remove your spreadsheet, will your product stream still bring value to your customer?
Yeah, I would say something similar, which is, don't chase the hype, right? That's one more way of actually putting it. But from a product leader perspective, you can adopt some framework, right? And that framework can be revenue based. If you look at your revenue funnels, what is the easiest revenue funnel to get? That's your customer renewals, right? Your customer retention and renewal. That customer already uses your product. You better get that customer to renew because that's the easiest thing to fulfill, right? Then comes customer expansion, right? You have like existing customers, they have 10 users, you want them to have 50 users and so on, right? And then last is the new customer acquisition, which is basically, these are customers that don't know about you, right? But they need to, they don't know how to use your product and all, but you need to sell to them, right? That's actually typically the hardest kind of revenue stream, right? Startups start out there, which is why it's very hard for them, right? So if you look at these kind of revenue funnels, you can actually say, well, hey, there is a wow of AI, yeah, there is a hype and all. Which of these revenue funnels is my key objective now, right? It could turn out that you are a mid-sized company where you're doing very well with your existing install base, you're expanding, but your new customer acquisition is down, right? And that's what you want to solve for. In that case, you say that, hey, look, I don't need to know about how customers are using this. I need the product to demo well to prospects. I need that wow feature that actually says, hey, this AI insight, this dashboard, maybe it will not be used too much by the actual users, but it's a great tool for me to sell to new prospects, right? So that's one way of looking at it. The other way is if you say that, new customers are approaching me, I have great lead gen, all of that stuff, but my problem is retention and expansion, right? So in that case, you can actually say, well, what can I do to actually retain, right? So you can actually say, I have a whole path and that is AI based on the usage and all that I've seen, it can start recommending, where else can that product be used. Now at Redwood, we had to do a lot of that work manually. We said, here are the main customer trends. Here's where customers could be using our product, but they are not. And how do we actually influence them, right? So you can actually use in-product AI to be able to achieve that, right? On the expansion side, Some of the things that we did was, bring a lot of these features in product and allow them to address scale and feel comfortable with scale so that, any new approvals that are needed, typically when you go from, let's say, a business unit level sale to like a corporate sale, all those things can be taken care of, right? So, figure out the right framework and then figure out what you want AI to do and then decide your strategy accordingly, right? So that's a big one. I would say the other one is, I already spoke about this, which is, be very clear about the user pain points, right? What are the key problems that you want to solve? There might be hundreds of problems. What are the next 2 problems or top 3 problems? I'm a big fan of this, right? Whenever a PM comes to me, it's like, if it is a big thesis that I need to kind of read, like what are the top 3 points that you are trying to get across, right? Because it actually helps you just focus and think. Yeah. So figure out what are the top 3 pain points. And I would say, last but not least is because AI is based so much on data, you have to validate all of your assumptions with data. And you have to form some kind of thesis on what that feature can or cannot do before you go too far. So that's very key, right? Because you're starting out small and because you're learning and, there's no glory in I always tell my teams, there's no glory in achieving a certain amount of accuracy just through pure AI. Then AI plus some manual data and all can get you there, right? Because, accuracy is much more important to the user than anything else, right? They don't care about this. They say it's a black box, right? And if AI is not being accurate, I simply won't use it. So I would say, validate everything with assumptions and get a lot of POCs. I think AI, it's very key to get your POCs in place, and you will inevitably have long beta cycles. That's a given. There's no magic, because otherwise what will happen is you'll just fail in production. And that failure will be a very expensive failure for the company. So that's very key to note. And by the way, AI, one of the things that I've observed, and I say this to my teams again and again, is it's very easy to build an AI POC. It's very difficult to build a production grade AI product. Yes. And so the, earliest beta, the earliest release you can with your friendly customers, alpha, beta, whatever, put that in a long beta cycle and keep kind of iterating on that. That's key.
Absolutely. Early adopter cycle is critical, right?
Yeah.
And I think the accuracy is what bites us at the end because you go live, they're fascinated and they have the wow factor, the customer.
Yeah.
And then they're seeing all these gains because now they can fire a bunch of people, right? And this actually happened for our product. And then they were like, how accurate is it? And then they were looking at to see, is there a huge user churn because of using the AI instead of humans? Yeah. And there was just a little bit 2%, 3% more varying consistently. And so they said, well, you have to prove that you're more accurate than the humans I'm going to replace. And then how do you go about that? So there are a bunch of libraries we used, but we couldn't. We had to pull out on the deal.
I think one rule of thumb, at least that I think is pretty good is the wow factors will typically be for your exec sponsors and buyers.
Yeah.
On the user side, it better work at a production grade. If you're trying to get new accounts and if you want to wow prospects, at least with hey, look, this is something that we are trying out, but we see tremendous possibilities and it's in the early stages. It's fine to say that, right? But at least they will know that you are working towards this innovative AI feature and it will help them in the longer term. So yeah. But when you get to the end users, it has to be production and tried and tested, or just in a long beta period. It's okay to say that this is in beta, but we are seeing promising results, right? Customer X used it. They got this accuracy, this precision, this level of recall, whatever metrics you use. Yeah, that's great.
But I also like to think of customer metrics to see are they ready for it.
Yeah.
And for example, when I was head of cloud for Cloudera, which is funny that I was head of Cloudera because Cloudera didn't have a cloud strategy and I was the head of their cloud strategy. And that's how they went under, right? They went up against AWS, which was all cloud. And the way we used to sell is go into companies and see, does the CIO have a cloud mandate? And if it's in their top 2 or 3 mandate, then they're ready to sell. Now that indicator hasn't happened yet. So when I'm looking at metrics, I'm thinking, how do I measure customer metrics to see, are they ready for me, for AI?
Yeah.
And you will not see an AI imperative just yet on a CIO's strategy. And of course, we're B2B folks, so sorry about the B2C folks in the group. And I don't know, what do you think of that? Have you seen anything at Redwood, perhaps? How do you know if your customer's ready for AI?
We dealt with IT operations groups and all. And some of these users are kind of like they're in the basement of the overall enterprise, right? And my challenge was, how do you get the buyer to, from that basement level to like a CIO? How do you sell to the CIO, right? And that's a different challenge, because what you need there is you need to impact corporate metrics. And so we actually, built this entire messaging around like automation fabrics. How does an automation fabric work? And more importantly, what are the different business metrics that a CIO can actually impact, right? So, because the goal was to get visibility at that level. So as we started doing that, then, AI again was a how, right? Customers weren't concerned about AI metrics. They were concerned about primarily like 3 big things, or 2 or 3 big things that we observed about was, how can I run my operations much more efficiently? How can I take some cost out of my overall IT team? Because I've been asked to, or like support company growth.
Yeah.
My CEO just came to me and told me that we are going to grow 25% next year. And by the way, you don't get any additional headcount, right? And so how do you work in that constraint? And then the third thing was, how do I provide faster customer service? So that was a big thing for them. And so, our job was like, how do you tie our product and all, and give them concrete examples of how we help them with this. And then a lot of groups did not really know about AI. In some cases, what was very interesting was this was like the use case that we actually found was, automation platform was a great way for any enterprise to enable AI. And why? Because an automation platform sits on top of every transaction that happens in your enterprise, and it feeds not just the transaction data, but the context in which that transaction occurred. So, hey, this was a purchase rec creation, which was in the context of your procure to pay process for this business unit, for this type of product and all. And you can actually, it's the perfect kind of connector to an AI to like put an AI model on top and help you kind of, learn from that, right? So from that, what we said was, automation can help train AI models and then use them in prediction mode. And it creates this whole virtuous cycle where you can actually automate more and more of the subjective stuff that humans do, using these bots or whatever you have, right? And based on that, you can actually get the humans to be more productive and do more strategic work. And so that message actually resonated big time, because the enabling of AI, it was put to them in the context of a business process and what they care about. It wasn't, here's the precision, here's the recall, or here's the accuracy and all. It was like, well, here's how many more, like for a loan processor, it was like, hey, mortgage interest rates just dropped down. Can you actually process 50% more mortgage applications and get that business? Or do you want to wait and hire humans over the next 6 months? By that time, you would have kind of lost out on this trend.
It's the cost savings and the efficiency, Madras, that we're driving. So what are your, did I ask you this? What are your favorite metrics or frameworks for measuring the success of an AI-powered product?
Yeah, this is interesting. There are no special, metrics for like AI-based products. I would say there are additional metrics. But first and foremost, it's your product and business metrics, right? What are your goals with the product? If you have retention goals, if you have GDR and NDR type of goals, if you have EBITDA goals, those kind of things are basic, right? So you got to you got to address that, right? You may have, like I said before, retention goals, expansion goals, and all of those, follow from your, your yearly planning and what that initial goals were for that overall business. So you start out with that. You also have your user-centric goals, right? These are kind of, where the rubber meets the road, which are, hey, I had an objective for the user to create at least 5 of these objects on my platform in the first 30 days, right? Did that happen, right? I need a cycle time of less than, these many minutes for somebody to do a certain task on my platform, right? Did that happen? So those are product-centric goals. So those will never be superseded, right? You'll always have those. And then you have AI-based metrics that are more model-related, right? Doing this manually versus with AI, was there an accuracy difference or what was that? So that's when your, AI model training and those kind of things can actually happen.
Right.
One big, I guess, advice that I can give here is always be transparent to the users and let them have more control on that rather than just being prescriptive. And what do I mean by that is you can do simple things, like, hey, I'm going to expose my AI confidence, this thing, but I'll allow you to set the confidence threshold as to when you think I'm smart enough as an AI model to help you or you want to take over. So this more like a collaborative approach, works very well. And that way you're just being transparent, right? For some people who are, who don't trust AI enough yet, they may actually set up very high thresholds, right? But some people want to be more adventurous and you have no control over what kind of use case leads to what kind of complexity in AI model and so on, right? And so I would highly advise that. So business metrics, user metrics, and then these AI-based metrics.
And on that front of AI metrics, there's the concern in society when you use AI on ethics.
Yeah.
And so how do you ensure fairness as a product leader so that you can gain trust? Because trust is one of those metrics you were just talking about.
Yeah.
What do product managers do in order for us to be able to improve the trust that people can have in AI?
That's a big one. And, product managers, of course, will have a lot of say and impact on this. And that will be typically in the early stages of the product as you shape the features, right? It's almost like once the product is released, it's out of your hands and then, it's too late then, right? One of the biggest concerns is the AI bias as to what happens when your AI model incorporates all the biases and all because of your training data, right? So the big advice there is certainly get your models, get your data to represent the kind of diverse data that you expect in a production environment, right? So that's first and foremost. You won't be able to solve every use case that way, but to the extent that you can, right? And I think that's why I said that validating your assumptions with data is really key, right? So I always ask my PMs, bring data to support anything and everything that you say, especially when it comes to AI, right? And run a lot of experiments, run a lot of POCs, do kind of deep dive on the results and really collaborate with your, engineers, data scientists and all. So I would say, that's certainly a big piece. I already mentioned, what your product will be used for. Just keep that, you may not be able to prevent unauthorized usage of your product. The other thing there is lock down the APIs. That's a big thing because you accidentally expose some parameter within the AI and all through this API payload, and you never know how your product is going to be used.
Yeah.
So it's just security is going to be one of the biggest concerns. So get all of the security and all addressed in your product. Like vendors like ChatGPT and all, they're actually facing this right now. There are startups that are now doing just security on top of ChatGPT usage. I remember we spent close to 6 months defining our GenAI policy for the entire company because we had employees left and right, putting company content in ChatGPT and saying, well, can you summarize this for me or something? I mean, it's someone in marketing, someone in PM, all of that, right? So now there are startups that will actually say, I'll give you an audit report of what was actually exposed to ChatGPT versus not, right? Our first step there was lock it down to at least ChatGPT Enterprise, right? Like, no one is allowed to use ChatGPT Consumer with like company data and so on. So I think security is the other big concern.
Security is a huge one, yeah, especially if you want to think of authentication and authorization of access to data.
Yeah. I think the other one way though, and again, right, when I bring up these problems, I mean, I always try to strive for solutions and like advice. So one advice here would be that make your AI as transparent as you can. So one example would be for the AI bias. You can simply say, hey, look, the representative data that this was trained, that this model was trained on was from this region and this type of, let's say, user profiles or something like that. And that's, you should keep that in mind. So I think just being that a little bit transparent to the user goes a long way.
But Claude does that pretty well, right? And Perplexity too. Perplexity does it really well, where it states the sources.
Yeah. Gemini is doing that as well now.
We were doing it in our product as well. And then how do you price a GenAI product? So I think there has to be a fixed cost and a variable cost. And the fixed cost is basically going to be the value of your platform. And this, I think, is a very important thing, because then you really think about what's the value your platform brings. And if you can turn off GenAI, will this thing work? And then the variable cost I transfer to my customers is based on what model they want to use. And since they don't want to be educated on all the models, I basically give them accuracy. So it's a dial that you can turn, and based on how much accuracy you want, 3.5, 4, or you switch to Anthropic, whatever else that you'd like. And each of that has a different pricing at this point. But I think at some point it's all going to get pretty cheap, that it will become like cloud infrastructure, hopefully, that it won't be that expensive. But that's how I approached it. And I don't know if you had other ways.
Yeah, I think, your approach is true for like a Gen AI based platform and all. If you're offering some kind of business functional SaaS product and all, where Gen AI is part of how you arrive at that, then you still have to figure out what is the unit of value for your end users, right? I mean, that can be at StarTex, I actually mentored this company. They're doing Gen AI based building permit applications. And they were asking me, hey, what's the right way to actually price this product and all? They're pricing it by project, because they are selling to developers. And for developers, it's the project over a period of time that is the most important measure. And so they're saying, well, yeah, per project is going to cost you this much. And then it's, it's a annual recurring revenue of X per project, right? Now, their technology is entirely AI-based. So you can, all you do is you feed in your building plans and everything like that. It'll actually make all the compliance checks. It'll make recommendations, all of that. And they're already having success, with that pricing model, right? What was very interesting was, how do you then take this and expand it a step further? And this was an interesting question that they asked me yesterday, was they said, well, the project ends after 2 years. How can I actually get more money from this, whatever, for this project, right? I said, you can introduce something called an archiving and say, hey, for your legal and compliance requirements, we'll actually archive this for, let's say, 10% or 20% of what we charged you for the project lifetime, right? And so that keeps it open, and, it gets, like, in their heads, like, hey, I might need this, I might have a compliance requirement pop up in 2 years. Do I really want to be searching for this over and over again? So I'll gladly so again, find what is valuable, what's that pain point, and that unit of value, and then charge accordingly.
So the question is, if many products stay in the POC stage, what is the launch criteria?
Yeah, for this, definitely learn from your friendly customers who are actually your best, because they are the actual users of the product, and you have to keep in constant touch. In fact, what we did was, at Redwood, we created an AI council where there were customers who were requesting, who were actually thought leaders, and they understood what they wanted from AI, and they were vocal enough to be able to say, hey, this works for me or does not, right? And actually, you'll be surprised, a lot of it wasn't even related to Gen AI. They were like, I need basic machine learning for XYZ. It's more valuable, right? So I think, again, the first thing is like their pain points and what they want. And once you've gotten beyond that, so what I'm trying to say there is you'll probably run multiple betas, not all of which will even make it past your beta stage, right? To get to production, there are a couple things. One is, definitely customers have signed off on the value. And then comes the other, your biz dev and sales related criteria, which is this going to move the needle in terms of pricing for the product? Am I getting additional, is this value that customers want to pay for or are willing to pay for, right? And that's where, again, it's not whether it's Gen AI or just simple machine learning. It's like, what does that do, right? So once you figure that out, then the next step is, hey, I guess it's kind of at the same time, but you're looking at, is the accuracy good enough that X number of customers have signed off that this actually works for me? And then, your field teams and all feel okay with that, right? Because one of the biggest obstacles in production, even before when it comes to customers accepting and actually realizing the value, is whether your sales team will sell it or not. And that's key, because they don't, if they don't feel confident in the product, you're building this, you won't achieve the results you're looking for.
Yeah, right? So sell and then build and then sell again.
Yeah, I mean, some of this happens in parallel. I had to do a lot of, hallway conversations and a lot of convincing for even some of the sales leaders, like somebody who leads sales for North America. Well, why would the customer buy this? Because that person, may be a skeptic to begin with. So how do you convert people? So there's a lot of that stuff that you would need to do. It's not all about AI accuracy and product related stuff. It's your field readiness and GTM as well.
So big round of applause for Abhijit. And sorry we couldn't get to your question. Maybe you can offline on it. Thank you so much, Abhijit. It's an honor hosting you, and we're really insightful. Thank you.
It's great to be here. Thanks.